Welcome to Endgame Sensei, where I give two unsuspecting IMs, chumps really, a position to play out, to further their skills. And I will talk badly about them when they play this out. It will be done at game-like conditions with 5 minutes and 30-second increment per move, just like the way endgames are played today, without much time. So here we begin. I will not prejudice the players by telling who played the specific position, and I just thought it would be nice for this particular position we're going to do today to kind of roll into it and then give them a chance to decide, and you to decide as well, what you think of the position. So,
wait, is this an end game?
Well, that's what I'm telling you. I'm showing you how it evolved. I'm not just giving you the end game. I'm giving you a little taste.
Oh, man, thank you.
Snip, snop, D5, check to the queen, all right, so this is the position we're going to start off in, and I'm going to let these guys think about it for a second, and I'm going to create a poll just so people can get a sense of what they think of this position. So I'll just say, who is better? And we can say black is winning, black is better. Dude, obviously a draw, and then we'll have another one was white is better. Okay, and we're gonna say, let's give it 5 minutes. We can chat a little bit while these guys are thinking about it. They do not know, by the way, who will be white and who will be black. Sometimes in this endgame sensei, we run it back. That is, we give them a chance to play both sides of the position. Yeah, and this will be, I think, an interesting one. One thing I want to say about this is, I was about to say who was who. Maybe I'll break my golden rule and I'll say who was who. So we had a suggestion to do an endgame of Karpov-Lautier. Now, I won't tell you who is Karpov in this particular position, but I just want to tell a quick story. By telling the story, it'll give them the chance to kind of think about what they think is going on in the position. So the first thing I did was I was like, well, which Karpov-Lautier does this dojo or meme? And I looked in ChessBase, and there are loads of games that Karpov played with Lautier through the 90s, and loads of endgames, a remarkable amount of endgames that Karpov, in general, won. So there's that, and I want to say there's a book out there, which is kind of it's not well written, but it's just a compilation of Karpov's endings. It was something with the title of something like Karpov's Best Endings. And, back in the day, you might know that me and Proust lived in the GM house. Now, at this GM house, there was a floating contingent of all kinds of players. We had GM Vinay Bhatt. Sam Shanklin was there for a while. I was there. Proust was there. GM Friedel lived down the street. We had all kinds of people coming in and out. And then for a while, in the back apartment, Irina Krush was living. And me and Irina got our hands on that Karpov book. And we had just real mellow study sessions going over these Karpov games. Very interesting indeed. So that was my memory of this kind of position. We were looking at a lot of this kind of stuff. And there's just loads of games that Karpov played like this. Now, one of the things is this is 94, and that's kind of like, even though Karpov isn't, number one anymore, or world champion. 94 is when he had, I think, one of the strongest results ever in chess history. So this is, in a lot of ways, a golden year for Karpov. Okay, and this is from the Golden Tournament, I believe, yes. This This is the golden tournament. 11 out of 13. 11 out of 13, my friends. It's a little bit unreal. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're coming in to the end of this poll. Why don't we give them a chance? We got some interesting results in the chat. David, what's your sense of this beast?
Well, I guess black's probably a little bit better.
Okay, why?
I guess their bishop's a bit better than white's bishop. Yeah, I guess that's the main reason.
All right, Kostya, what are your thoughts?
The black pawn structure is pretty healthy too, I would say. Like not a lot of like targets or counterplay for white, but black has some options to poke at white's pawns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, to me, it kind of feels like a somewhat concrete position, but yeah, white has to like resolve this pin, and there's like weaknesses on the third rank. They're kind of annoying. So yeah, definitely black is better.
Okay, before I ask Kostya another question, we got a raid from the famous Lula. Lula Robs, thank you for joining us. We're doing Endgame Sensei today, where I give two chumps a position to play out. They always bungle it. They stink up the dojo, but we do it for your entertainment. Okay? Kostya, what other factors in the position need to be addressed? Said out loud.
I guess white has an isolated queen pawn, which is a thing. To me, I don't know if it's like super relevant. For me, the bigger problem is that white just has like weaknesses. Like everything feels loose on the king side. And like black structure is a lot more compact.
Okay. Chess fans, to my mind, they have not said the most interesting part of the position. They might be thinking it subconsciously, but they have not said it out loud. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to prejudice. I'm not going to prejudice. I will tell you, though.
OCB?
After we get this thing going on.
Yeah, the bishops don't have the same color.
The bishops don't have the same color. Thank you, Kostya. It needs to be. It really has to be said out loud. Okay, really? We'll talk about why, if at all, that's a big deal. And I want to just stress, I have not looked at this with the computer. I just have an intuitive sense. Obviously, I've seen how the game plays out. And so one of the things I want to say about this position, just as a chess fan, okay, is that I know a lot of noobs out there complain about draws at the higher level. And somehow they think like, this would be a draw. If you listen to commentary these days and about a position like this, they would already be moaning. They'd be like, oh, this is a dumb draw, yada, yada, yada. No, my friends. The party is just beginning. How we end up evaluating it, that's another question. But the party is just beginning. All right, are you guys ready?
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh, they don't sound too convinced, do they? Oh, I guess so. All right. So Kostya's been stinking it up pretty bad here. Let's see what we got. I'll let Kostya be white the first time around. We'll try to run it back. Depends how long it takes. 5:30 is our designated time control. You guys ready? Here it comes. Pop. Match players not found online. I hope it didn't. Oh, I blew it. I always blow it. I'm not the best when it comes to this stuff. D. Bruce. Almost there. Stay on target. Stay on target. All right, here it comes. All right, there it is. They are starting, my friends. And they are going to mute their mic so I can say all of the dirty things about them. Black to move. It's obviously black needs a good move here. And one of the things I want to just say, it's very important to say out loud with the opposite color bishops, is First of all, there's a dirty misunderstanding in, let's say, the lower ratings that bishops of opposite color means it's going to be a draw. No, not at all true, my friends. Not at all true. And one of the things is it has very much drawing tendencies if all the other pieces are off. But if black, or rather any of the bishops, can create an attack on their color, so here for black, the white color, the white squares, then it's a nasty move, I think, King F7. Then they will have the advantage. And in a sense, they're going to be up a piece on the light squares, right? In fact, let's switch it to look at from black's point of view. I didn't want to prejudice them. That's why I started it off from the white point of view. Now, I have to admit, last game, Proust made some moves that I was like, God, that doesn't seem right. And then in hindsight, I was like, maybe not so bad. This one doesn't feel right because it seems to be encouraging rook d7. And yeah, so that's why I'm not a huge fan. But we'll see. We'll give it a chance. There it is, rook d7. And unless the king is a genius on g6, which I'm not seeing right away, then king f7 was a kind of serious mistake. And, well, and this is important, without the rooks, there's going to be no attack. So Mr. Proust really blew it on this one. He really blew it on this one. Now, first thing I need to do is I need to say David is black. That's always muy importante. Now, did I get the times wrong? Sometimes I get it wrong. I don't think I did. No, the times are correct. They have to mute their mics and their speakers. At least that's what the arrangement is here. So just my noob understanding here is that rook e7, king e7, and then bishop protecting the pawn. We're going to play king f2. No problemo, senor. No problemo. And, sometimes people have to, well, I think it is. It's like, so let me say this about the bishops of opposite color. Having the rooks on the board is a huge advantage because, first of all, the rook can complement the bishop by controlling not only the white squares, but the dark squares as well. And also, without the rooks, oh my gosh, even if he loses a pawn, this famed drawing tendency of the bishops of opposite color can really start to happen. But in this case, I don't even see how he loses the pawn. So I think we're going to say this was a real, either he misappreciated rook d7 or didn't understand that really, really, really we don't want to trade rooks. Yeah, I don't think it should be a hard draw. Arguably, black is still a touch better, but no. But no, it's not going to be a problem. After bishop e3 and king f2, you could probably play bishop c3 too. You would hope that Kosio would redeem himself, right? Now, the nice thing about David is he is a fighter. And so, he's going to say, look, at least my king comes up and talks to the light squares. I really don't think it's much of anything. But, we'll still get our entertainment now, right? We'll get some entertainment. I'm anticipating king f2, but there's probably other ways of playing it. He could probably play g4 and king g3 as well. The advantage of going to c3 with the bishop would be that later with knight d2, we would have, well, arguably a little bit more flexibility. That's no big thing. Now, what is David going to try to say? He's going to try to say, buddy, I'm going to win the pawn on d4, and to my mind, that isn't much, but it is something. There's no doubt that it is something. Maybe that was David's whole thought all along, is that this is the way he's going to win the pawn. And one of the things I do admire about endgame experts who are much better than myself is I think they would say that this just doesn't offer anything for black, even if he wins the pawn. But on a practical level, I still appreciate that it's not over Grover by any means here. I think it is probably over Grover, though, right? And Kostya just has a couple ways of thinking about this. For example, is the king and pawn endgame drawing after g4, bishop takes, king takes, knight d4? Or do you just do knight d4, king f4, and say, hey, buddy, I'm coming to f5? Also a thought. It's going to be very hard to avoid the complete liquidation. All right, Kostya's getting a little frisky over there. How do I feel about this? Okay. So if there's an argument here for Kostya's move, it's he wants the knight instead of the bishop. And we could argue that he could argue that the knight is better than the bishop in this resulting position where the pawns are all on one side. And it's true. I think that's also, he should draw that without too much difficulty. So we're anticipating something like knight d4, bishop takes, king takes, knight e2, king e5, knight f4. And yeah, that is of course a total draw. But black will make Kostya at least squirm a little bit, you would think, right, in that position. I don't think it's going to be much of a squirm, though, unfortunately. For us, we would like some squirm. We would like some squirm, even if they don't give us some squirm. Now, look, David's a fighter, man. Look at that. Now, in general, white wants to play g4. Yeah, in general, we want to play g4. But Kostya has had a bad habit. We've seen this before on the Endgame Sensei. A bad habit of pushing his pawns to the wrong color. So we're about to see that in action. Knight e2, by the way, no puedo take on h3. So knight e2 is also possible now. And maybe we don't even lose L pawn. Yep. If Kostya blows this one, we're going to have to take away some of his dojo privileges. We're going to have to take away some of the guy's credibility if he loses this one. Oh, man, Kostya. Is there something wrong with knight takes d4? No, I thought that's what he was going to do. Knight e2, okay. Oh, David, buddy. Yo, boss. Are we missing something here? Knight f4 takes on h3. Yo, boss. Yo, boss. Oh, he has a bishop there. I thought, honestly, I'm just going to admit it. I didn't even see knight takes f4. I'm just going to admit it. I'm just going to totally admit it, which makes knight e2 from Kostya even more controversial. Because this one, maybe black has a little juice. All right, let's get down to brass tacks. This one is still technically a draw, but Kostya is pressing his luck. He is pressing his luck in this position. So a big choice here with gf, keeping the pawn, or bishop f4, giving the pawn. I'm just going to admit it, okay? Sometimes you got to admit it. For whatever reason, I was thinking that knight f4 was winning the piece. I thought bishop h3 was impossible. So I blew it, okay? That's the simple kind of mistake I can make. I missed the knight on, I don't know why I missed it. In any case, we're getting this position. He decides, boom, I'm going to give up the pawn in order to have, to not have a terrible, terrible bishop. Now, this one is technically drawn, and I would say the, what do you want to call it? The position to have in the back of our minds here is if you imagine, let's say, the h pawn traded for the g pawn, which would be an achievement for black, i.e. I don't think white has to just give him to it. But the key thing there is that even if black got that exchange, that position with the two pawns is a draw, because white can set himself up such as to sacrifice this guy whenever f4 comes. Imagine g5, f5, and f4 coming. And we can set it up so that we can always take on f4 by putting a king here and a bishop there. So that's why this is technically drawing. But I think we got to say, Kostya made it harder on himself. Now, I think I would have played g5 there, because we're not going to lose this stuff. But to David's credit or point, there's no rush. We can always play g5 later. And Kostya is now he's going to have to work. This isn't going to be, you would think anyways, that David can come up with ways to make this unpleasant. For example, that position that I described with the h pawn traded for the g pawn, one basic thing that David could strive for is to get the same position but sack the h pawn. You know, so like push this guy here, put the king here, for example, smack this guy down, then get this guy passed, right? And then Kostya is at the very least going to have to know that position that I talked about. And arguably, he's already thinking of that when he made his decision to play knight e2. Now, is there another setup for black besides, so the basic idea that I see, though there might be another one, is to play g5, king g6, f5, and either h4 or f4, gambiting the pawn so that we get past. Is there another idea besides that? I don't see it, but maybe there is. Masturbate 9. Oh, come on. Hey, what are you doing to me with your handle, buddy? Hey, take it easy. People are saying this is just losing for white. No, this is a draw. But Kostya has to know what he's doing. I got baited. I did get baited. Yeah, this is a draw, and it was precisely that position I referred to. So again, I think because it's an important position, I'm just going to try to sear it into your memory. Imagine this one gone for this one, these pawns here, and then the black-white king needs to be here and the bishop here, so that when I push f4, the bishop gets sacked. So for us, this is important because can David set up something like g5, king g6, f5, and then a fortuitous h4 or fortuitous f4 to get two connected passers in a way that white cannot defend? It's definitely a little spicy. It is drawn, but he's going to have to be careful about it. And one hilarious thing is when you imagine the setup for white being king here and bishop here so that the pawn cannot advance. I want to stress about that. When imagine the bishop's looking at that pawn, because this pawn's on f5. I want to stress about that because the bishop's looking at the pawn, that's why the king can't go on a journey. Right? It can't here, and it can't come up because white's king is here. But Here's the point. The pawn on g3 is in the way of the white king assuming the position on g3. That's why, even though I'm confident this is a draw, it's a little tricky. Like, imagine Kostya knows that position. No guarantee that he does, because he's an endgame noob. And the reason he's not a GM yet is because he hasn't practiced his endgames. But imagine that he knows that. You know, he has to really be careful that black doesn't get past the two connectors in a way that basically black would love to achieve g5 and f4 and the king back to f5 and then g4, g3, then it is toast. And one of the things we got to say about that h-pawn, it might just be meaningless. You know, a lot of times in these bishops of opposite color, it doesn't matter that you have your pawn. It just doesn't matter. So I think David's going to do this king g6 thing. And then f5, and then he's got to figure it out. Now, it doesn't hurt anything that he's going to waste a little time. We could be here forever, my friends, because this could just last forever. He definitely I would give him a massage too, though. Not only to give myself some time, but to make him think that it's just an easy draw. Let him be lulled to sleep a little bit with it. Now, personally, I thought that the bishop belonged on that long diagonal, so I don't see how bishop c8 helps. Now he goes for it with this move. Ay, Daddy doesn't like it. Daddy doesn't like this. No, I don't like this. Just GH. Draw no problem, my friend. Draw no problem. They're stinking up the dojo. Stinking up the dojo. Now, admittedly, I think it was drawn anyway. But now this is completely drawn, like bishop d8 and bishop c7. Goodbye, Lucy. Yeah, forget about it. Yeah, come on, boys. I think I should have the sensei power to tell him to stop, you know? Because you're hurting me. But also just because it's dead. Stop because you're hurting me. That was gross, my friends. That was really gross. When I make fun of these guys, I do it with the best of spirit. But sometimes, because it hurts me, it pains my eyes. Jaliptic is right. Bishop c7 and king g1 draw. Yeah, just switch the side, says Zeno. That's where I'm at too, buddy. This is gross. This is disgusting. Allowing the rook trade. Give me a Breakovich. Oh, man. How nasty can it get here? How nasty can it get? Wrath of Gods asking important questions. Was it possible to get the two passed pawns? And the problem for us as black is not only do we need the two passed pawns, but we need them to be on the right color. That's where it gets tricky. We need them to be on the dark squares. We cannot allow the blockade on the light squares, the dark squares, excuse me. So, right, that's fine. Bishop d6, and we can end the game. Wash our hands. I'm calling it. Maybe I need a direct line into David's house there. I could get a little speaker that would come from his dumb painting behind him, be like, David, it's over, buddy. Dream's over. Oh, don't call this painting dumb, man. What are you doing, huh? What kind of person are you? It's ridiculous. Yep. Oh, this has got to stop. This is just too nasty. Nasty, nasty, nasty girls. Can it end? Can it end? Yeah, we need some penance. Question about the classical turning. Is it hurting others if I need to drop out halfway through? It does hurt others. How How much it hurts us is another question. It definitely is very bad news if you don't tell DM Hoki in advance and somebody, doesn't have a game for that week. That's the worst part of it if you do that. Yeah. Jeez, this has got to stop, man. This is just too nasty. Nasty, nasty girls. What are they doing? What are they doing? All right, I'm going to tell them on our Discord. I'm just going to be like, all right, stop the madness now. Maybe they'll listen to that. They can't hear me because I'm on mute, so they can't hear all my fine words of wisdom. I wish I could offer a draw, but I'm not allowed to. Oh. As you guys know, we've talked about this on Dojo Talks, is that David was one of the first anti-draw crusaders. And you can see it in a position like this, man, just playing on forever. One time he was playing against Alex Yermolinsky, like one of the greatest rook and pawn players of all time. It was like 3 pawns against 3 pawns, all on the same side of the board, and Proust just kept playing it out, man. He just kept playing it out. He didn't want to stop. He just didn't want to stop. He's enjoying it too much. Oh, this pains me. Maybe it's just pride. I don't know. It's something, could be something more sinister than pride. Did Kostya squirm at all? There was a little squirm, but allowing the rook trade. Oh my gosh. I won't tell them too when we come on break. I'll just tell them that they're idiots, All right, here it comes, h3. The pawns have now reached the light squares. They will be completely blockaded and the game is over. Pretty basic at this point, my friends. You park it on h2, put the king on f2, and then you go to sleep. You go to sleep. Oh. David's dreaming of a white Christmas over there. There it is, king f2. Just park it. Oh. I didn't like, by the way, moving the king away from f2. Now, I'm sure this is still fine, but he's messing with my soul a little bit here, Kostias. Like, why would you do that, boss? Huh? Why would you move your king away from f2? Oh, now David's going to get encouraged. That's the worst part of it. David's going to get encouraged, and then where are we going to be? Phew. Terribles. King needed to stay on f2. I'd have no idea. I don't know what's wrong with Kostya. Is this still a draw? Yeah, but come on, Kostya. I can't look at it, buddy. Can't look at it. End it. That's right, Dritman. Well, Kostya's going to look foolish if David wins this. Kostya's the one who's going to look foolish if David wins this. Oh, man. David doesn't shake hands, man. David, he's never gonna acquiesce to this. They must have seen my little Discord message telling him to end it. They don't care. They don't care about my feelings. They just don't care. Proust is gonna stalemate his own king on h1 or something. I think that's Kostya's intention, maybe. It's like king g1, bishop h2, king h1, and then the second black plays f4, we just play king f2, and then the king never comes out. And it's a cruel, play king f2, Kostya. Just play king f2, boss. Do you have to? No, you don't, but just do it for me. Huh? for me. Just king f2, and then he's never coming out. Okay, king f2 never comes out. Maybe black can win. Maybe white can win. Maybe there's some way white can win now. Okay, end it. Oh my gosh. Bruce is coming in to mate him with the bishop or something. I don't know what he's doing. I don't understand. This is above me. This is above me. They're stinking up the dojo hard now. Okay. That was abysmal. That was totally abysmal. I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying anything.
It was a good game.
I'm not saying anything, Kostya. I'm not saying anything negative until you guys go silent again. All right, here we go. We're reversing the colors. We're running it back. Bam. All right, there it is. Whew. And let's flip it so we'll see it from black's perspective. Oh, if he plays king f7, we're going to scream. Weird that Bruce got a tough couple seconds taken off. I thought it was just me, black's move. Anyways. So, no king f7, Kostya. No king f7. No king f7. So, again, just while we're on the purity of this position, before it gets mangled by our IMs here, the interesting thing is that black has the opportunity to create an attack on the light squares. And notice the bishop on d2. Oh, God. The bishop on d2 is really nasty. g5. Unbelievably bad. Unbelievable. Yep, this just makes me sad. Gokul fan saying knight c7 or knight g5. Definitely knight c7. The move is definitely knight c7. g5, I'm just even having trouble. So now your knight can't even move. And you are encouraging pawn trades. Now, white could blow it by playing d5. That would allow knight d4. Game aborted.
Sorry.
All right. Do you guys want to start all the way
Sorry,
over?
I lost track of it.
You want to just... Here, I'll start this again. We're going to give Kostya the opportunity to make a take back. He doesn't have to play g5 if he doesn't want to. Boom. Mm-hmm. You're probably going to play g5 anyway. Both because he's convinced he was right. Two, because of a sense of pride. There's no takebacks in chess. Oh, and I know what happened, my friends. So this weird chess.com thing is if I set up a game like this and a person doesn't move within the first minute, then it aborts. That's what happened there. Okay, so I don't know. I don't know what these people are doing. The reason, by the way, that knight c7 is really important is you need to get your rook, black's rook, engaged on a square like a3 or a2. That's where you can hurt the guy. And here, I don't know what g5 is doing. And no. No. So now I believe white is threatening d5. So Kostya is going to have to play something like king f7. You can't move the knight because of the pawn on f6. And
Right, yeah.
And so if king f7, our old friend rook d7 appears. And maybe even d5 anyway, because some kind of bishop c3 coming. Maybe white's better after king f7, d5. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, the stink. The dojo stink. Oh man, the dojo stink. I think this has been the worst one. Of all the dojo stinks that we've had, this might be the worst. This might be the worst one. Question from Baiting, the baiting dude. The pawn moves are too early without optimal major piece placement. Well, not only that, but I don't know what the pawn moves do. If black is going to hurt white, he needs to start some aggro on the light squares pronto with the rook. So if I go back to the starting position, it's our move, and white definitely owes us the move king f2. Maybe there's some way he can make g4, king g3 work, but he owes us some time. So he owes us time. He has a bad bishop on d2, and the pawn on d4 is pathetic. We've got to say, winning the pawn is not my priority on d4. It's not. As we saw with David, that's not how you win the game. You win the game by saying, I have an extra piece on the light squares, and the bishop on d2 is garbage. Right? That's how you win the game. And that's why you need to play a move like knight c7 to liberate your rook on e8. All right, so now there's a basic question. Does d5 create drama for black? I.e. d5 followed by bishop c3. Maybe no, I don't know. I don't know, man. Maybe Kostya's thinking that d5, knight c7, we're going to win the pawn. And maybe, but, rook d7, rook e7, I don't know, man. It's all falling apart. And all white has to do, especially after the rooks are traded, is trade off all the pawns with a move like h4. Zip zap, you can sacrifice a piece then. Jesse only responds to donations. Soundly is talking about the idea of knight g5 at the beginning. We talk about it. I don't think so. Why? And there's a very simple reason why. Because the bishop on d2 is actually a real terrible mess when you think about it, because it's getting blocked by its own d4 pawn, plus the pawns on h6, g7, f6 are making that bishop bad, in addition to making the knight on f3 bad. And every time Mitch, Fabian, and Vishnu hear me say that the pawn is dominating the knight, they get upset, so I like to say it especially for them. It is true, the very beginning position, that both minor pieces are really dominated by those pawns. And that's one of the reasons why d5, yuck, that pawn was better on g7. Okay, so Mr. Bruce is calculating rook d7, calculating d5. He might be able to play h4 right away too. Yep, they're doing pawns and kings. They're thinking that pawns are people. They are not people, my friend. They are not people. Bishop b4 might even be an interesting move here, intending rook d7, not even giving the chump a chance to, if white wins this game, then he can have real bragging rights. David is white, not black. Excuse me, thank you. That is because we ran it back, and I am not a streaming GM. I am not. This is well known. They call me Boomer GM. That's what they do. I like to move. Kostya is black.
Jesse, man, for the love of God, please update clocks and color.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. Jeez, Melise. All right, here we go. We're going to switch the clocks and the color. There you go. For the love of God. This is a little bit of my revenge on Kostya and David, especially Kostya, because Kostya's a millennial and he knows how the internet works. And so I never do, man. I never know how the internet works. And then it falls apart on me. And then they're like, cry. Can't you figure out how the internet works? I'm like, no, I can't. I don't know how it works, man. So this is my way of getting back at Kostya, that dirty millennial with his avocado toast. I just had to nail him a little bit here. Well, he can't hear me. He's too ashamed to go back and listen to the VOD. I guarantee it. He's not going to listen. He's too ashamed. He's got endgame shame. A lot of players have endgame shame. I remember there was a time in my life, especially as a young kid, I had real endgame shame, because I'd just be blowing it left and right. Well, here's the bummer here for Kostya. If he plays king g6, at some point d5 is going to come and it's not going to be pleasant. If he plays rook e7, it's just a dead draw. So there we go. King g6, playing a little bit with fire. A little bit with fire. Because we have to say that the rook on d7 isn't necessarily a chump here. Now, the good news for Kostya is that d5 at least runs into knight c5. So that's like a nice little thing for us. And I guess I hope Kostya is dreaming of fixing his rook to rook a8 or something. We can only hope. Rook d6, okay. Okay, make him think about it. So, I assume we're going to say something like, well, if the knight moves, knight e5 will be annoying. d5 might also potentially be annoying, depending on where he goes. In general, I think white shouldn't have any problems now. Now, arguably, one of the interesting things, in all sincerity, about the beginning position is I'm pretty sure a lot of players, stronger than myself, would say white is totally fine and there's no way he should lose this. They would say it's a draw. And I have a little bit of respect for that opinion in the sense that you could say with best play, he probably should draw it. I think that's true, but I definitely think black is better, and the correct move will show the game. It becomes difficult, especially if black keeps the rooks on. Oh, we're just playing with fire here now, Kostya. We're just playing with fire, buddy. Like bishop c3, boss. You got to wonder about bishop c3, dude. Whew, man. Some real grief here. Some real grief, buddy. Yeah, it's like, now sometimes this happens to me. You guys seen it. I don't do my own game analysis. It often gets this way. When you push it, right? When you push it in a position like this, things can go wrong. They can go very wrong. And so that's what we're worried about here for Kostya, is that they go wrong. Now, my assumption is that knight c7 is kind of got to be played, right? Because d5 is a big thing. Maybe Kostya should start thinking about making a draw too. But knight c7, knight e5, it's starting to look a little scary, my friends. You know what I'm saying? It's starting to look a little uncomfortable. Like El Accidente. Like El Accidente is about to happen. And also on knight c7, maybe we just chuck the pawn with d5, knight d5, and let's say bishop somewhere, you know? Also a thought. That could be very annoying, honestly. Knight c7, d5, knight d5, bishop d4. intending like king e3. He should be fine. What was the result of game one? It was a draw. It was one of the saddest experiences of the dojo, and we're hoping that Kostya was being ironic when he said it was a good game. We're hoping that he was being ironic. And you gotta wonder sometimes, because the millennials love irony. So you never know. They're shifty creatures. You never know when they're being serious or when they're being real, you know? You just don't know. It was a draw for Kostya and David and a loss for chess. Yes, indeed. That is the correct analysis. My name is Legion. All right, knight c7 happens. Will David chuck the pawn with d5, or will he play something like knight e5? Knight e5, man. That looks They both look fine for white. White is getting activity.
This might be unnecessary and maybe contrary to what you are doing, but for aesthetic purposes, can you flip the board? Pretty please.
For aesthetic purposes, can I flip the board? Well, I can't. I understand why you wanted to do it. Originally, I wanted to look at it from Black's point of view, but now that they've blown it so bad, we might as well flip the board, right? No, we might as well flip the board. And as I was saying, an accident could happen here. So we got knight e5 and d5 is what David's calculating. And this time, you know, last game we had several chump moves being played out very quickly, and, you know, they got up to 7 minutes apiece, which can definitely happen in this newfangled era of chess. But here David doesn't have much time. This is an interesting attempt. So we're assuming that the intention after bishop a5 is knight d5, and then maybe bishop d8. Oh, there's another problem, though. On knight d5, you also have to worry about L-friend knight d2. This is what I mean by a potential accident. There's a potential accident waiting to happen here. Oh, we're getting into a little time pressure. A little time pressure. Oh, it's getting spicy, Kostya. It's getting spicy, buddy. What are you gonna... Oh! This is what I'm talking about, a potential accident. This is what we call a potential accident. Now, rook d8 is the safe move. Maybe David has something spicier than that. Maybe he could play knight e5 and rook d7. Also possible. In general, it's only Kostya. Well, yeah, shouldn't be any more grief for the white player here. One nice variation is knight e5, king f5, g4, king f4, bishop d2, mate, Mr. Tate. Uh-oh, David. Rook d8's the safe one, buddy. Ooh, now rook b6 maybe is fine. The grief is, can black activate the rook with rook a7? Black should be fine. I mean, white should still be fine, but I thought rook b6 was a little bit maybe unnecessary, because now we do have to think. Almost by chance, almost like David's forced Kostya to be like, hey, you could activate the rook, and you could be a player too. All right, here's David's intention. Might be fine. Might be fine. Might be just fine, David. Bishop f3 makes me a little nervous. This coach I got, KGB, he gets real upset when I try to do like what is happening here with like a tactical solution. You know, he gets like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to mess with me with the tactics? It was unnecessary. This game's not going to end, actually. It's just going to keep going. Yeah. Now, I want to say with that one, Rook B6, that mistake of move 7 from David, that one, I think, is more excusable in that, he was down, the time pressure, any kind of weird thing can happen. But it was like a little, like, let's say, in this position, unaware that black has one idea, and that's to activate the rook, right? He's got one idea. So, yeah, what did we say here? Rook D8 was interesting. I thought knight E5, also probably pretty simple, because king G7 and rook D7. Anyways, here we go. Rook A5, G4. And, yeah, it should still be a totally fine draw, no problem. White has to, I guess, consider that he has to calculate a pawn endgame now, right? Rook A2, rook E2. And in general, you don't want to calculate the pawn endgame if you don't have to. But here he has to. But I don't see any problem with the pawn endgame, And by that I just mean black is the one who can decide to go into the pawn endgame. So it gives him an interesting chance to, try to calculate something out. All right, H5, fine. Am I too cruel to them? You just tell me. If I'm being too cruel, will I change my ways? I can't promise. But I can appreciate that I can be too cruel. I understand. I like H5 too as a practical attempt, because now white has to worry. He has to say to himself, am I worried about H4? Am I worried about H4? Maybe a little bit, yeah. All right, so he takes, makes sense. Hello. Something like, rook E3? He has to be a little careful. It's true. Mr. Proust could still blow this. That rook B6 move really gave some chances. Gentle like a chainsaw. And by the way, I mean, as much as I make fun of these guys, the part of it where I know I would fail or have potential to fail is exactly where they're suffering here with this 30-second increment. You do not lose on time, but what can happen is you just start making bad moves, It is very possible to make some bad moves in a position like this. All right, Kostya has a couple ideas. If he could achieve F5 to F4, that would be nice. That would be very nice if he could achieve F5, F4. One bummer, maybe F5 right now, but you got to worry about knight E5 threatening mate, our friend mate, So maybe not F5. But if we could achieve F5, F4, that would be a cool thing. All right, so we're anticipating king G3, right? And now was G5 or it was king F7 as the first move. Which one was worse? They were both abysmal. They both basically had the same misunderstanding, not realizing that black's chances were simply, really solely getting the rook activated. And now F5 is actually very spicy. But we're assuming that the saving, F5 would threaten mate, by the way. We're assuming that a save is going to be, and I'm not sure about this, F5, rook H8, king G6, knight E5. I'm not sure that was a save because of the rook G2 problem. Holy smokes! Oh, you guys, that might have been a miss right there. That might have been a little miss. Now, it's still a little spicy here for dude. Still a little spicy. Oh, David, you had this thing, man. It slipped out of your hands. You were the one pressing at one point, David. Oof. F5 looked very good, but bishop A8 poses similar problems, it's got to be said. And now rook G2 is mate! It's mate! 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 Check, mate! Check to the miserable king! Well, my friends, that was stinking up the dojo.
GG.
Let me just tell you guys, don't watch the VOD. Don't watch the VOD. I was yelling at you guys, profanity. It just got really bad. It just got really bad. I hope
tough
other
position,
people, well, yeah.
Not so easy.
Okay, I'm going to invite you guys to the board, and we can talk about it a little bit. All right, so here we go. Invite Mr. Pruce, and invite Mr. Kostya. All right, so let's get to the position. So the fundamental thing I was yelling at you guys about was that neither of you appreciated that the rook on E8 has to get into the game on the A file. Has to. There's no other way. So King F7 was criminal because you're allowing the exchange of rooks, after which white has no problems. And then G5 was a similar problem because then the knight's not going to be able to move for a while because the F6 pawn. So both of them, yeah, disaster first moves.
Jesse, I think you misunderstand what our weaknesses are or anything like that. Like, I think Kostya and I can speak for myself. I wanted to play rook A8, but like my knight was hanging. So
well, right. So knight C7, boss.
I didn't figure that move out,
okay.
All right. But I understood that I wanted the rook on E8 to go to A2/A3. And Kostya eventually got the rook to those squares in the second game.
Okay, we could talk about that. You definitely didn't have to let him. But here, like King F7, Rook D7, the dream's over. Right? Dream's over.
Originally I'd planned to trade the bishop on F3 and then play King D5 and take the D4 pawn.
Right. Well, yeah, we saw that in the game, right?
But then I hesitated about like him playing King G4 in that position. And so I thought like, oh, maybe I don't have to trade on F3. Maybe I can just play one more improving move. So I sort of changed my plan slightly there.
Good. Okay. So look, I honestly, I'm not going to be mean about it. I know it's fun for me to be mean, fun for myself.
Fine.
Hopefully.
I'm just saying, like if you think we didn't know that the rook should be on a good square, I'm not sure if that's what we're missing, right? It's like a matter of like, you've got 50 seconds to calculate or 55 seconds to calculate your move.
I get it.
There's multiple ways to try and free up the king, rook, and knight. Like Kostya was thinking King F7 to defend the knight, and if rook check, he wants to prepare G6 for his king. So
right. So the thing I want to just stress, though, with the plan that you mentioned, and I'm not sure I have this kind of endgame skill myself, but I'm pretty sure that the KGBs of the world what they would say, and I think it's correct, is you winning the D pawn isn't it. Your advantage consists in an attack on the light squares. And so if you give up the rook to win the pawn, it's missing the point. You've got to use the knight and the bishop and the rook on the light squares as an extra piece, right? Because when you trade off this, when you win the pawn, you got to trade off the one or more of these stupid pieces. That's where your advantage is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that like normally when you're playing a game, you have to have multiple scenarios in mind that you could win, and depending how your opponent plays, you go for different ones. Mm-hmm. So sometimes what you have to do is, squeeze, like take the pawn. Like
okay,
I don't know if you can, just because the game Lautier-Karpov ended with an attack with the pieces doesn't mean that was the only scenario that Karpov would have had in mind that he could.
Okay, all I'm trying to say is, I think, and I'm going to admit that I'm not always on this level, that the idea for black of winning the pawn, even if you could do it, but at the cost of trading one of the minors, or the rooks, especially the rooks, no good. It's not enough.
Okay.
Now, I think it's fair to say that black is probably not winning this position if white is very careful. I don't think but we could talk about that in terms of how the game goes. But with winning the pawn, it's not enough. And in fact, let me just stress, because this is a big point that I try to stress with my students. One of the reasons I wanted you guys to say out loud that it was opposite color bishops, is the value of pawns goes down and the value of the initiative goes up when you've got opposite color bishop. You can call them middle games or end games, right? Yeah. And that's why you got to keep the rooks, right? You got to keep the rooks for it to be anything. Okay, let me show you guys the game. Go ahead.
So I had in mind, Jesse, a scenario where the black king is on d5, and black is playing like knight takes d4.
All right.
And basically white can't trade the last bishop for the knight because the king and pawn ending's lost. And so you push the king back, and then you put the black king on e4, and I thought that would be enough to win. Is that like completely unrealistic?
I think so, yeah.
So you don't think you could win that even in like the best case scenario for black with a king on e4, 3-on-2, knight versus bishop?
I mean, I think Kostya gave you as good as he could ever get. And with those two pawns being up, that was just a draw.
No, but that's because it was bishops. Like if I played bishop takes f3.
I know what you're saying, but no, what like you're envisioning knight versus bishop?
Yeah.
No, that's not a win.
Okay.
Okay, I'll show you this game, and then we'll conclude, and then we'll come back for dojo talks. Knight c7, got to be the first move. Some people were saying knight g5, also kind of interesting. Let's look at, because people were talking about knight g5. Now, the grief with this, just on the surface, is that we get to trade off this bishop. But the intention is, of course, hey, what about this nasty pin on the knight? And it's a little egregious, we got to admit, right? So what do we got to do? Rook b6?
Yeah, I was thinking rook a6 for white.
Okay,
yeah,
so that's probably the same thing.
Rook ba, rook a3, rook b2.
Oh, okay, wait a sec.
I think rook b8 for black. I was actually going to go for this position until you said the thing about opposite color bishops, and then I was like, well, I guess this isn't the position Jesse wants us to play. Because I thought this is actually kind of unpleasant for white, like king h7 or bishop d5.
This is very similar to what you got in the game eventually.
Yeah, that's why I had no problem finding bishop d5 in the game, because I was like, oh, it's like that endgame I wanted in the first place.
Yeah. Although I think you had a winning tactic in that position as well.
Oh, yeah.
If you give the rook check, and then on king e3, retreat your bishop to c6, hitting the rook on e8.
Oh, and then rook check again.
And then rook check again, and the bishop takes on f3.
So props to whoever suggested this in chat. It's at least interesting. So boom. Now, let's just ask a dumb question. If you're going to play rook a8 instead of rook f8, wouldn't you want to play hg in that case?
I thought about hg, but then I think...
You're worried about king f2?
I guess king f2, just like unpinning.
Okay. This is interesting. Now maybe you have black would need a plan here, right? It's not clear. It's going to be hard to strengthen the position because you don't have, your pawns are double, but.
Yeah.
Like if we imagine this pawn just disappears, how would we break through there, right? Especially if we're going to play this at some point.
Yeah, it's really doesn't feel like enough.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like enough. But I'm glad that that it's mentioned because these Karpov endgames, by the way, I mean, really, both not just, let's say you could talk about you could argue that knight c7 is objectively better, but also just in terms of posing problems for the opponent. I can imagine Karpov making the case that knight g5 just doesn't have enough. Whereas this, I don't know if it's winning, but white really has to watch himself because let's assume king f2 is forced. Let's just assume for a second. It's hard to imagine not breaking the pin. And then boom, all of a sudden it's really tricky. And it's amazing how nasty the bishop on d2 is. Here, I'll show you the game. So bishop e3. Now, we could argue, we could look at other moves, but this is obviously, let's call it the most natural move. Knight b5, the rook is terrible over there. And now it's getting tricky, and rook b3 will definitely lose, but it's already difficult. It's already a little bit difficult here. Surprising, right? It's like, what? How did that happen? How did that happen?
Yeah, the coordination is amazing.
Rook b3, and now it's gone because check, and then tap to the rook, and the poor rook doesn't really have any good squares.
It leaves the third rank, knight e3, rook a3.
Right. And rook d3 is what happened. Bishop c4 resigns. So fast, right? So fast beginning from this position. Yeah, so fast. One of the things actually I'm very thankful about knight g5, the suggestion, which it had, for whatever reason, it hadn't crossed my mind just because I was focused on playing against the bishop on d2. But I like it because it is the kind of thing that maybe I would have done, thinking like I have some pressure there. And it's interesting that Karpov didn't do it. I think he's saying to himself that that resulting position would be nothing. But it is scary. If I was white, I'd definitely be scared. You know, I'm definitely going to be scared in this position, no doubt about it. Whether it's rook f8 or, some kind of rook b8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think these guys this is worthy for you guys. I really, one of the things that we're going to do, I'm going to just give a taste of this, is this new dojo regime, this new training thing that we've got going. Part of the idea is to have people play out positions like this as practice against their peers, people rated around the same level they are, just like these guys are doing. And then whether they have some jerk like me commenting on their games or not, they can analyze it and kind of think about what their moves were and then look at, say, what a Karpov or somebody else played instead of what they did, right? And you can kind of get a sense in like the difference in level with a move like knight c7.
By the way, I wanted to ask you guys, because this is a rule I remember learning from Akobian many years ago. But he told me in positions with opposite color bishops and knights, if you're playing for a win, then a good way to think about it is that your bishop is playing against their knight and your knight is playing against their bishop.
Okay.
And he made it sound like a principle, like a Soviet principle. And I feel like I've seen it, I don't know, in some other places too, but it's always made sense to me.
Right, and one of the things I was telling Chad is one of the reasons to be worried about it for white is that all the pieces are funky. Even the rook on d6, if we get the initiative on the A file with the rook, our rook on e8, then the rook on d6 is misplaced. But what I was going to say about playing against the two minors is that black's pawns, f6, g7, h6, are great against both minors. And I love saying it, that the pawn dominates the knight on f6, because Mitch Fabian, fellow dojoer, gets so upset when I say it, as does Vishnu. But they're perfect, and that's why g5 made me squirm, Kostya. I was like, what is he doing? What is he doing to my pawns? What has he
I
done?
did have some like mild tactical hope against f6 to sort of like.
Well, yeah, David,
some
you
kind of
had
action
more
going
than
for my
hope, buddy.
pieces then.
You had more than hope.
Yeah, no, I wasn't happy about G5. Again, it's like, I don't know. We either need more time to think about the position, or we need a position where it doesn't hinge on the first move.
Well, I gave you guys 5 minutes to be thinking about it.
Oh, but it's still.
You don't get more than 5 minutes in one of these games.
I feel like if the clock's not ticking, I'm not thinking.
Part of our dojo programming is going to be to stay off the Twitter when you're playing your games, stay off the phone. Kostya, get on the ball, buddy. Okay. Right, so we're going to come back in a little bit, and this will wrap up Dojo Talks. All right, you guys. So let's come back in a little bit. This is, I think, one of the things, too, when I think about the dojo training thing, right, is I think me being cruel is funny, but part of really, I think, a process of, like, so let's say when I'm going over my games, sometimes I'm enormously cruel to myself. I'll be like, you effer, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? I can't believe you. What's going on here? And that kind of critique, it doesn't have to be hateful. It doesn't have to be hateful. But, being highly critical of oneself and if you're doing it with a peer, to be nicer than what I'm being. But to be critical about how to approach these positions, I think it's important.